So my name is Jamie Anderson and I spoke at this morning's USB Leaders Angle. My talk was about success, and I guess the real message to everyone was that success is great, shooting for the moon is great, but you have to come to a point in your life where you realize that the moon that you're shooting for, the success that you're trying to achieve, is defined in your own way. And the other message really for people was the fact that success is not about you, it's very much about us. It's about your family, your partner, your children, and those people who mean something to you. So if we define success without thinking about success in that collective way, then maybe we're not having success at all. I guess I've got a question to start the morning, and my question is for all of us, I guess, to think about a question. And the question is really to imagine if you'd spent 20 of your years of your life, half of your life, really dreaming to be someone, really trying to become something. And then, after spending half of your life, with this big aspiration, you become that someone. You shoot for the moon, you reach the moon, but then when you become the someone who you thought you wanted to become, you realize it's not what you want at all. What would you do then? I grew up in a small country town called Shepparton, which is about 2 hours north of Melbourne, in the southeast of Victoria. That's me on the front, my front right there. I had 6 brothers and sisters. We grew up in a small rural community, we didn't have much. And, every single one of my brothers and sisters left school by the time they were 15. And they didn't leave school at 15 because they wanted to leave school. They left school because it was a necessity. They went off to work. But also growing up as a kid, and from the time I can remember, I had this big dream, growing up in a small country town. And the big dream actually was to become a professional cyclist. And that took a lot of dedication and hard work. And I guess that dedication was one of the reasons that I also did very well at school. And I remember this from the age, I guess, of around 15, that I started to feel this kind of anxiety because I was doing well on my bike, I was getting results, but people started to say things to me. And the thing that people were saying to me was, well, isn't this just a dream? Cycling's a dream. You love it, it's your sport, but dreams rarely pay the bills. They rarely get you places. And isn't it time you start being more realistic? Literally, I guess a couple of months after this photograph was taken, I sat my end of year exams at school, my year 12 exams. And I did extremely well. I mean, top 5% in the state, that kind of stuff, and I was sitting at home one day and a letter came in the mail. And unbeknownst to me, some of my fantastic high school teachers, 2 of them, Mr. Collins and Miss Jones, they'd submitted me for a scholarship. And I got this letter in the mail, and it was from the University of Melbourne, and I was offered a full study grant to go to Melbourne to study. And literally a few days later, I got another letter, and the letter was from the Australian Institute of Sport. And that was an offer to go to Adelaide and join the road development program, the Olympic program. But I remember holding these 2 letters in my hand, and my family were incredible. My parents said, it's your choice. It's your choice. I don't know if you can appreciate this, but actually I didn't feel like I had a choice at all. I knew that what my dream was to go off to Europe. But in the end, I decided to go to university. For the next 20 years, I worked really hard, because I really wanted to make all those people back home proud of me. I got my first scholarship, I went on to a graduate scholarship. But the funny thing was, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know what I could be, because the place I grew up in Australia, everyone was a blue-collar worker. But then I saw these guys who had fancy suits and expensive German cars and stuff, and I thought, hang on, they were the business school professors. So I said, I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to be one of them. And that's kind of what I did. In fact, after my graduate studies, I went on, I got a job at London Business School because I was competitive. I wasn't going to be any kind of business school professor. I was going to be one of the world's best. And if I'm going to be one of the world's best, I'm going to go to the best institution. So that by the time I was 29 years old, I was at London Business School, one of the top graduate management schools in the world. When I got to London Business School, I thought, I've made it. How do you think they made me feel when I got to London Business School? This Australian kid from the bush who didn't go to Harvard, didn't go to INSEAD, didn't go to Cambridge. They made me feel like I was a small person. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that? This egotistical, hierarchical environment? What do you do? You work harder, you fight. And I worked really hard. And by the time I was 39, which is this guy, I was there. At 39 years old, I was a full professor. I'd published in MIT Sloan Management Review, California Management Review. I was earning more money than I ever thought was possible. And I was traveling the world. I was on the road all the time, and I had departmental responsibility, I had budget responsibility, and I was miserable. I was very unhealthy. I was about 10 kilograms heavier than I am now. 10 kilograms. And for any of you who've been a sports person as a teenager, how does that feel when you're carrying 10 kilos of baggage around? Doesn't feel good. Look, I wasn't like grossly obese, but I was soft. And of course, the other thing was that, besides being this big professor and management guru and all that stuff, the more important thing was I wasn't alone anymore. Because on that journey, that 10-year journey, I'd met this amazing Belgian woman, Annemie. We got married. I was the father of 3 children. But I wasn't a good dad. I wasn't a good husband. And in 2009, my wife and I, Annemie, we sat down. We took a bottle of wine. I think it was 2. And I knew what was on the label by then. We took and what we did is we took a piece of paper. We took a big sheet of paper and we divided it into 4 boxes. In the top left box, we drew a picture of what we wanted for our relationship. So the top left box was the relationship we wanted, what we wanted, not what we had at that moment. The top right box was place. And what we talked about was living in a place where our kids could run barefoot and be free like we did when we were kids. Now, the bottom right, my wife Annemie, it was very important for her to get back to doing what she loved. She was a teacher. But with my job, I was on the road all the time. She'd been at home with the kids for 7 years. And of course, that was her passion. What do you think I drew at the bottom right of that little piece of paper? That. And I sat with Annemie in 2009, and we're sitting there on the sofa, and on the TV came this amazing event called the World Masters Games. It was in Sydney. Have you heard of the World Masters Games? It's an Olympics for old people like us. Yes, yeah. I'm sitting on the sofa with my wife, Annemie, and we'd just drawn this picture. I said, Annemie, I'm going to go. I said, the next one in 4 years is in Torino, in Italy. Okay, it's not France, but pretty close. I'm going to go. Guys, I don't know if your wife's ever looked at you like, she looked at me with my 77 kilograms and she said, go for it. She said, go for it. Now, of course, the problem, and this was the problem with the bottom left box, because the bottom left box was career. These are the 4 boxes, right? It's relationships, it's the place, it's your passion, and then it's the career. And what was the problem for me? The problem was that bottom left box did not fit, because the person who I was, this guy, it didn't fit. It didn't connect with the other pieces. A few days after, I went into that prestigious business school and I resigned. The thing I'm saying to you is that at any point in your life you're going to make this choice, you will have fear, you'll be afraid. It's the self-fear stuff. Now, of course, what about if my wife Annemie had not agreed with this? What about if she really cared about the status and the money and the big downtown apartment? What would have happened then? We would have separated. I was very lucky. At first, I tried to renegotiate my contract with them. I said, I want to work part-time. They said, no, all or nothing, tenure track or nothing. But over time, they kind of came around a bit. They called me up and said, well, how about you come to us 1 or 2 days a week? Oh, sorry, 1 or 2 days a month. So that for me was the economic security bit. You know, I had a couple of days sort of there each month, which is what I started to do. But what I did was I got back on my bike. Got back on my bike and I started to train. The other thing we did was we moved from where we were living and we moved to Belgium because Annemie wanted to be close to her family. And the other reason we moved to Belgium was what? Belgium is the most competitive masters cycling, competition in the world. But more importantly, I started to become a dad again. Spending time with my kids, I was working from home and just loving that, spending all this time with them and connecting with them. And then I started to think about the work stuff. And and then it came to me, if I'm going to ride that, and I'm going to still use my knowledge, it's keynote speaking. It's obvious, isn't it? What's the most wonderful thing about keynote speaking? You work a little and you earn enough. This was one of the happiest days of my life. In August 2013, I stood on the start line of the World Masters Games in Torino. And if you look at that face, and you look at this face you see today, this is a different person. I'd become a different person, not just physically, but in my head. And around me at that race were 160 of the world's best cyclists. The Russians, the Czech guys, the Italian team. And I was there in my national colours. I can't tell you how this feels. But better than that was, of course, the fact that I was not in Torino alone. I was in Torino with my beautiful Belgian wife, Annemie, and 3 of the most amazing kids. And they'd been on this journey. We'd been on this journey together. This was not me in Torino, it was us. As I stood on the start line, we were getting marshalled, into the start. My little girl snuck through. She took my hand and she looked at me and she said, Papa, it's okay if you don't win. The circuit, the World Masters Games circuit, was 9 laps of an 8-kilometre circuit. 9 laps. And every single lap, we went over Mount Cappuccini. In the background, you see a mountain. And Mount Cappuccini was about a 1-kilometre climb, starting at a 12% gradient, with an 18% gradient at the top. For 4 years, I'd trained to put my body over that hill. I knew what the course was like. For 4 years, I lost 12 kilograms because I had to get this little frame over that hill. Every single time we went over Mount Cappuccini, I looked over my shoulder and there were 20 more guys gone. There were 20 more guys gone. And with 3 laps to go, I was still there. And every single lap, there were 3 little kids and an amazing Belgian wife wrapped in an Australian flag, screaming. And every time I went past, I gave the kids the thumbs up. I'm all right. They were cheering. But I didn't win. That was an incredible Czech cyclist, former professional. I didn't get second. That was an Italian. But I did come home with a bronze medal. You can clap now. Yeah. So, what's my message to you? To all of us, my message is that there's nothing wrong with success. Success is great. The reason I'm standing here, the reason I can ride that bike is because of my success, the hard work that I put in for that 20 years. So don't get me wrong, success is great. But I think at a point in our lives, we have to ask ourselves and realize the fact that there are lots of moons out there in the universe. So whatever moon you were shooting for, make sure it's your own moon. And I wish you well on that journey. So thank you very much. Thank you.